Support for Audacious with Kyone Wolfe provided by a generous contribution from Suzanne Hopgood in memory of Frank Lord.
From Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolfe, surrounded by people in kilts, the smell of haggis, and the sound of those beautiful bagpipes. You may think I'm in Scotland. Nay, well, sort of nay. I'm at an event that started in Scotland, which then came to Scotland, Connecticut, and then moved to Brooklyn, Connecticut, the Scottish Highland Festival Games. Stroll with us through this pop-up Scotland, full of beautiful sounds, rich stories, feats of strength, and oh yes, that mellifluous accent. And later, we'll see another side of Scottish might when we meet two women who accomplished something so mind-bogglingly difficult and uncommon, they persuaded their government to go on record acknowledging and apologizing for 173 years of witch trials. It's impossible not to connect this painful history to present-day anxieties about power, punishment, who gets othered, and who gets believed. But first, back at the festival in Connecticut, producer Jessica Severin de Martinez and I mosey through the gates, and we're drawn towards a melody that goes beyond just being heard. It's hypnotizing. So I ask harpist Haley Hewitt from Manchester, Connecticut, can we interview you about harps?
All day.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell me about harps.
Harps are an ancient instrument, and all the cultures around the world have kind of developed them in their own way. And here today we have Scottish harps. And even within the Scottish harp world, we have a lot of variety. As you can see, each one is a little different. We got different sizes, different materials of wood, different materials of string. So it's a very broad world of harps, and we love to talk about them. We find them really cool.
What brought you into the harp world?
I saw one when I was really little, and I just was drawn like a magnet to it, and we're still stuck.
Do you have a harp of your own that is like the harp that you would save if the whole world was burning down?
Absolutely. Her name is Gwen. She's right over there. I've had her since I was 8, and she is the harp I was magnetized to. Yeah.
Does she have a soul? Do you feel like that?
Yeah, I do. I find that people form a connection with their instrument, and I'm so glad you asked. Nobody's ever asked me that before. And you can't really force that. People find their instrument, and when it's right, they can feel that. And it's just a magical thing.
What do you think it is about harps that puts people into another dimension?
I think it's the resonance and just how real it is. When you pluck the string, it vibrates and it bounces around in the sound box, and it's a physical thing that you're feeling and hearing, and you're also seeing the strings. And I think that's really important, that you can see what's happening. It's a very visual experience watching somebody play. So I think all that coming together makes such a powerful experience. So people think of it as magical.
So when you sit down to your harp and you get lost in it, where do you go?
Elsewhere. Yeah. Not here.
Oh, I'd love it. If it's okay, can you play like a short little ditty for us?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I'll go make sure Gwen's all tuned up.
As we float away from Hannah and her harp, we spot a man playing a peculiar-looking flute. It's almost translucent. I asked him to tell me everything about it.
It is 3D printed out of clear filament. It's free for printing on Thingiverse.
How does it feel different to play this flute than any other flute? Because I imagine if you know how to play this flute, you know how to play the standard flute.
I actually have never played a wooden flute. This is the only flute I've played. I've heard that the low D is a little hard to get, but other than that, it's pretty decent.
Will you play something for us? That was Benjamin Elzerman from East Hartford, Connecticut. Then, in the distance, this sound cuts through everything. Nice. That was good. And right on cue, a dashing man in a kilt saunters up to us. John Morin from Ashford is an instructor with Western swordsmanship technique and research based in Willimantic. I ask him exactly what is going on here.
You're looking at people doing historical European martial arts. So we take historical manuals from Europe and we interpret them and try fighting with them. So it's something that I've been involved with for 20 years now, and it's come a long way in that time, and we're growing, which is really, really good.
How did you get into it?
I saw the very beginning of the club in the 4th of July parade, actually the Boombox parade in Willimantic. And it was like 2 blocks from my house, and it was just something I kind of took to naturally. So I've been doing it ever since.
How much of doing this makes you feel like a little kid, and how much of doing this makes you feel like a grown-up?
Oh, it's probably like 50-50. I mean, I do this to have fun. There are people who are very competitive about it and are very focused on that sort of aspect of it. But for me, I'm just out here having fun. I'm a big kid playing with a sword. But I have to be in charge, so that's the adult part.
When you hear the sound of the blades clinking,
Yep.
What do you feel?
The German term is fuel, and they actually have a word for it, because you're feeling, when you hit, they should sort of stick together, ideally, the blades. And then at that point, you can feel how much they're pushing on you and how much you're pushing back. And there's a whole game you can play right there at the point of contact that is just about re-maneuvering and staying in contact. And that's called winding in German, but it's one of my favorites, and you get the sword sliding back and forth, and you get a ton of noise as you're doing it. And it's one of my favorites.
In the distance, we hear some primal sounds.
Come on, big man!
Much like the harp and flute earlier, the grunting is hypnotic. We can't resist wandering closer to this soundtrack of profound effort. We spot the very strong-looking Eric Lewis from Woburn, Massachusetts, and ask, what are they doing here?
This is weight over bar.
What does that mean?
It means we're throwing a weight up and over a bar.
Okay, so what's happening now?
So now we go up to 10'6", and he has a 42-pound weight for height, and we're going to see if he can actually get out there.
Yeah. We get 3 attempts if you fail. It just like cycles through. You fail all 3, you're done. You make any of them, you're good. You advance to the next height. Strong work there. And you just keep going until everybody's last man standing. Or lady.
Less person standing.
Yes, ma'am.
It's the equivalent of a 5-gallon bucket of paint.
That's a lot of paint. That's a lot of paint.
About 42 pounds.
Yeah! It did. You got it.
So, what's your name?
Christopher Annino, and I'm actually a pro wrestler. This is my first games. I used to compete in powerlifting, and I love it. Yeah.
Why do you love it so much?
Well, you know, it's a good camaraderie because I'm used to like competing in the NCAA and competitive powerlifting, and everyone's so nice. I mean, very supportive. Everyone's kind, so it's a great atmosphere. Yeah.
You have an impressive grunt. Tell me about the purpose of the grunt.
Well, you get all your angst out. You channel all your power and just let it all out.
What are you hoping to accomplish today?
Doing my best. Yeah, I love this. Nice. You got it!
Yeah!
Sorry.
Thank you so much. You're going to do great.
Yes.
Yes!
How'd that feel?
That felt good. That's a new one for me. I don't think I ever thrown it that high before.
How high is it?
11-6.
They got a hog and a livestock building contest over there.
Okay, so who makes a festival like this happen? Who keeps it going year after year until it becomes a Connecticut tradition with a Scottish accent? For that, we climb into a trailer to talk with two people who've been with the festival from the very beginning. Co-chairman and vice president of Scotland, Connecticut Highland Festival Committee, Reggie Patchell, and the only living founding member of the Scottish Highland Festival and Games.
My name is John H. Spencer, and I live in Scotland.
Connecticut.
Not Scotland.
Scotland. Have you been to Scotland?
12 times.
Oh.
Yeah, and I have yet to figure out what's more beautiful, the people or the scenery. Scenery you can find all over the world. The people in Scotland are different.
How so?
If you stood on a street corner in Glasgow and scratched your head and looked a little perplexed, I guarantee you someone would say, "Do you need help? Can I help you?" It's a different part of the world.
Can you do this whole interview in the Scottish accent?
He can.
Well, it depends on what part of Scotland you want me to come from.
Yeah.
If I came from Stewarton, down in the south of Scotland, you spoke about it yesterday. Festival, and yet, what do you think about that, eh? About 1 out of 10 words you might get, you know. If you're from Glasgow, not Glasgow, Glasgow, you'd be able to understand, but some words would be quite different than the way we use them. And if you were from up in the Northern Highlands, you might find people speaking English more like we do. And that's because some centuries ago, there were a lot of English forts up in the Highlands, and the Gaelic-speaking people learned their English from the English, so they speak English a little differently. I love to listen to it.
You and me both. I have a weakness for the Scottish accent. And I've also heard it called the Scottish burr. Is that right?
It's a burr. In Irish, it's a brogue. In Scotland, it's a burr. There's nothing wrong with a brogue, you know, but it's not a burr.
It's not a bit. What do you look forward to most every year?
It's a Bonnie News contest.
What is that?
We have 3 seated judges, and I'm looking for judges, by the way. Seated judges blindfolded, and the line of kilted Scotsmen come up, and one at a time you look for muscles, if that's important to you.
So you're touching the knees and the legs.
Or anything that you think is important. And then a person is announced the winner of the Bonnie Knees contest, and it's a lot of fun, isn't it, Reg? It's one of my enjoyable endeavors. And then they get a trophy.
Is the trophy a giant leg?
No.
The one thing I would be curious about, if you were to go back to Scotland for a day, to Scotland,
Yeah.
and I don't have the accent.
Scotland.
She's got the German accent.
I've got the German accent. What would you eat?
Well, I'd have to have some haggis.
Haggis?
Haggis.
You know, we got some haggis. You know what a haggis is?
Tell us.
Well, a haggis is a sheep's stomach filled with ground up parts of the sheep that you normally wouldn't eat, along with some oatmeal and some seasonings. And then it's boiled, and then you cut the stomach open and indulge. There's a poem called The Address to the Haggis that was written by Robert Burns. Robert was on his way, or Robbie was on his way to Edinburgh from the Glasgow area. And he was to be speaking to the gentry at a dinner in Edinburgh. And he wrote this poem, which made fun of the gentry, but they didn't understand it. And it was called The Address to the Haggis. We're fire on the sudsy face, great chieftain of the puddin' race, abun them all your tacky upper lace, punch, tripe with them. Where are you worthy your grace? His legs by arm. The groaning trench you there you full, your hood is like a distant hill. Your pin would help to mend the mild in time of need, and through your pores the dews distill like amber bead. His knife, say rustic labor date, and cut you up with ready slight, trenching your gushing unters a bright like only ditch. And then, oh, what a glorious sight. Warm, reeking, rich. And horn for horn they stretch and strive till they will take the hindmost. On they drive, and that's as far as I'm gonna go. I've had the honor of doing that in Scotland.
Scotland.
Yeah, at a Burns supper. Burns suppers are held every year in January, near the birth of Robert Burns, all over the world. I mean, all over the world. It's amazing that it's lasted this long.
Hey, can I take 1 second just to be quiet and listen to this?
Oh, sure.
When you hear bagpipes, how do you feel?
They were meant to make you feel one of two ways: ready for fight or ready for flight. The Germans in World War I referred to the Scottish as the ladies from hell, because these people would come out playing the bagpipes, no weapons, playing the bagpipes out of the trenches and come marching at them. And here they were in kilts, and what came next was hell. And they call them the ladies from hell. So it's meant to instill that in you, or scare the hell out of you, and make you run. When I feel it, the hair raises on what hair there is left, rises on the back of my neck, makes the heart beat a little faster.
Because the bagpipe can be so divisive. Some people love it. I'm with you.
No, that's
hair
right.
stands up, and some people can't stand it. And I wonder, for those who can't stand the sound of a bagpipe, if that gives you information on them.
Yeah, they don't hear the music. One who plays the bagpipes or enjoys listening to it hears the music through all the noise, which is what people who don't like think it's all about. It's just noise. That music just grabs you.
John Spencer, thank you so much for talking with me.
Oh, thank you for listening.
Events like the Scottish Highland Festival and Games are how people here in the States can feel connected with Scotland. The live music, which you'll hear throughout this episode, the tradition, the haggis, that feeling of being welcomed into something so much older than you. But every place on Earth is multifaceted. When we get back, two Scottish women who are getting their country to reckon with a chapter in Scotland's history that's been left too quiet for too long.
And I just thought, where are the women? There's no statues to named women here. There's statues to architects and sailors and soldiers and writers, but no women at all.
I'm Kyone Wolfe. This is Audacious. Stay with me. This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. When we in America think about witch trials, we tend to think of Salem, Massachusetts, a wave of accusations that began in 1692 with more than 200 people accused and 20 people executed, most of them women. And here in Connecticut, more than 30 years before Salem, witch trials culminated with at least 34 accused and 11 put to death. Again, mostly women. But Scotland has its own, even earlier witch trial history, and the scale of injustice is staggering. Over nearly 2 centuries, Scotland saw accusations by the thousands and executions by the thousands. Today, 2 women are trying to do something about it. Not by retelling history like some spooky campfire story, but by framing it more accurately as a human rights catastrophe and a warning for today. Lawyer Claire Mitchell and writer Zoe Venditozzi created Witches of Scotland, a campaign focused on the roughly 4,000 people, again mostly women, accused of witchcraft in Scotland between 1563 and 1736, and many of the 4,000 were executed. Claire and Zoe also host a podcast and have written a book with a title that does not hold back, How to Kill a Witch, The Patriarchy's Guide to Silencing Women. So before we get into the major tangible differences they've made with their campaign, I asked Claire to put her finger on the genesis of all this pain. What was the Witchcraft Act of 1563?
In Scotland, there was a Reformation taking place. The Catholic Church was on the slide, and the Protestant Church was on the rise. The Protestant Church was in charge pretty much of the Parliament. These were Protestant people that were in Parliament, and our Queen was Catholic. And there was a real tension about getting rid of Catholicism. So instead of getting rid of Catholicism, what they decided to do was pass the Witchcraft Act to stop people going to folk that called themselves Catholics to make spells and rituals and those sorts of things. So there wasn't really a big witchcraft problem, inverted commas, when the Witchcraft Act was passed. They were really just trying to clamp down on Catholic ideology. But then by the time the Witchcraft Act had bedded in and people were used to it, Mary Queen of Scots, who had signed the act, her son was then brought up by the people, the Protestants, because Mary Queen of Scots had to flee the country, and he was brought up very much in this world where the devil was out to get him because he was God's envoy on earth, and the way the devil got him was sending witches out to do bad in society. So that's the sum total of the Witchcraft Act.
And this is a law that was effective between 1563 and 1736. That's 173 years. What were some, as the years went by, what were some ideas about what constituted a witch? Like what one might do that was beyond the pale, so to speak?
The Act says that you're guilty of witchcraft if either you commit acts of sorcery, of necromancy, or of witchcraft, and it doesn't further describe it. So sorcery, spells, necromancy, speaking with the dead, and acts of witchcraft. No doubt these sorts of things were so common at the time that they felt they didn't have to further describe it. And you could be guilty of witchcraft if you do those things, but also if you're the person consulting someone and asking them to do it, you're also guilty of witchcraft. But as time went on, an interpretation was put on top of that. And the interpretation was very much that these acts were done for the devil, on behalf of the devil. And that's the whole demonic part of it isn't actually present in writing. That was an interpretation put on it by James VI of Scotland. And that's when people started to confess. They had to confess to renouncing their Catholicism or their religion altogether, not just Catholicism, but their Protestantism as well. They had to debase themselves by having sex with the devil. They had to do everything the opposite way round from the church. So there had to be baptism, but that baptism had to be by the devil. He had to put his hand on your head and on your foot and you had to say all in between belonged to the devil.
Zoe, any addition to that?
What's really interesting about it is that all those over the 173 years, I mean, I was trying to work out in my head there what would count as a generation. What's that, 40 years, 50 years? So, over many generations anyway. And it didn't really change that much, even though, if we think about 173 years ago from now, huge changes. But the idea of the witch and the power that the idea of the witch had in society didn't really change that much until at the end, and then it did change, and the law completely changed, and then you'd be killed one day and the law changed, and the next day it would be a fine. But the idea of the witch never really waned, and it had these 5 different peaks. So it means that it was just in the consciousness of the country for that long, which I think is kind of staggering.
How bad did this get?
It got very bad. In Scotland, the amount that we know about through research is that approximately 4,000 people were accused, and you think about 2/3 of those, 2,500 were executed. Those numbers are very, very conservative. Firstly, because in the first of the 5 waves that Zoe has mentioned, we have very, very poor record keeping, and things apparently got, and I'm doing this in inverted commas, out of control. So we don't really have a good feel about how many people it was for that particular time. And also record keeping is really, really poor. So the people that did the research in the 70s, Christina Larner and a few other people, they wrote at the start of their book on the survey of Scottish witchcraft saying, we are restricted by money and by time. And these are the names that we've come up with. So we know, for example, a citizen researcher, Judith Langland Scott, who in her own tiny area of Scotland has taken the numbers from approximately from 32, and she's done a deep dive and she's found another 8 in that one tiny area. So if you compare that tiny, tiny amount in that tiny area and you expanded that all over the country, you can see how it could be a much, much larger amount.
So I'd like to move into the two of you. Why does this matter to you? Why take this under your wing as any sort of project? And what have you done with this?
I work in Edinburgh in the Old Town as a criminal lawyer. I specialised not in trial work, but in appellate work. So I was in the appeal court arguing about miscarriages of justice, and living and working in the Old Town in Edinburgh. I'm standing in a court that dates back from the 17th century. I'm wearing the clothes of an 18th century man. I'm wearing a horsehair wig and a silk gown while I'm doing my job during the day. And I'm dealing with cases or referring to cases or institutional writers that are hundreds of years old. So the past does not seem like far away when you're dealing with things in the law. And I was also growing up very much a goth. I'm very much interested in witches and the supernatural and all that sort of stuff. So all those things kind of collided into me deciding at some point to start looking at the witchcraft trials and looking at a guy called Sir George Mackenzie, the Bloody Mackenzie, who was a prosecutor at the time of the witchcraft trials, and finding out what he thought about it. And strangely, although he was known to be fearsome, and that's where he got his nickname, the Bloody Mackenzie, he was actually quite restrained in relation to witchcraft accusations. So anyway, I was doing all this research, and I had also read a book quite around that time called Where Are the Women, which talks about imagining the world being a place where women are remembered by every street name, where women have the municipal buildings named after them. And it really opened my eyes to, in Scotland, how little of our public spaces are taken up with women's history. And all that came together one day when I was walking my dogs, and I was just walking around Princes Street Garden, the main green area in Edinburgh, and I just thought, where are the women? There's no statues to named women here. There's statues to architects and sailors and soldiers and writers, but no women at all. And I got to a part in the park, which is a full-size statue of a bear. And it tells the story of the bear during the Second World War. And I was like, oh my God, I now know the story of a bear during the Second World War. I do not know the story of any women. So that beer was a beer given to us by the Polish in recognition for the mutual assistance given by the Scots and the Poles during the war. And I thought, not only are we not recording the brilliant things that women do, or the inspirational things that women do, or the creative things that women do, we're also not recording really important history in relation to women in Scotland. A really brutal, terrible miscarriage of justice that has had trickle-down effects into Scottish society, and tells of a terrible period of time in Scottish history where people, mostly women, 84-85% of the numbers I gave you earlier were women, were accused of being witches. And that has got to have an effect on the psyche. So it was at that point that I decided that I wanted a campaign. And shortly after, I met Zoe.
We were talking about true crime podcasts. Somehow we'd got into that. And we were talking about how they are overwhelmingly listened to by women. And why is it that women like listening to true crime podcasts, which, if we're honest, are largely about the murder of women by men? I mean, that tends to be what they're about. And we were talking about why is it that women listen to that? And we think it's kind of like because we live our lives often, most of us, knowing that we're in danger at certain points, from like sort of a banal thing of you leave a restaurant, you leave a bar or a party or whatever, and your friends say to you, right, text me as soon as you get home. That we've all held a key between our fingers, and most of us have, that you make sure you're organized before you get out the taxi so you're not fumbling for keys, that sort of thing. So we're talking about that, and we realized, both of us, during this conversation, that we were clearly both feminists, clearly both in touch with our rage, but that we have a very similar sense of humour as well on lots of things. And I'd said to Claire, I'd really like to start my own podcast, but not a true crime one. And I'm a writer, but I don't really want to do a books podcast. I do loads of interviews of other writers, but I want to have a different angle. And Claire then had this idea, and we met a few weeks later, and she said, right, bear with me. What do you know about the Scottish witch trials? My answer was nothing. Why? And then she explained to me that she'd had this idea for doing the campaign and wanted to do a companion podcast of 6 episodes. And was I interested in doing it with her? And I was like, yeah, let's do that. So that's how I got involved in the campaign.
And that campaign broke through. That was Zoe Venditozzi, one half of Witches of Scotland, a podcast and advocacy project she runs with human rights lawyer Claire Mitchell. They've spent the last 5 years working to set the record straight for those accused and to reckon with the ripple effects those accusations had on whole communities. After the break, Claire and Zoe, on a quintessentially Scottish symbol, reimagined to reckon with the past, the Witches of Scotland tartan.
It's pulling the threads of the past, if you'll pardon the pun, into the present and remembering what happened to people then in order to galvanise ourselves to do something about injustice now.
I'm Kyone Wolfe. This is Audacious. Stay tuned. This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolfe, and we're back with the women behind the campaign Witches of Scotland, human rights lawyer Claire Mitchell and writer Zoe Venditozzi. For generations in Scotland, the Witchcraft Act turned suspicion of dark powers into prosecution, and prosecution into death. The case against you could be made out of thin air. A neighbor's grudge dressed up as a testimony, a bad harvest turned into blame. Someone got sick and needed a reason. And once the law starts prosecuting what can't be verified, it stops being about truth, and it becomes about who has the power to name you. The Witchcraft Act shows how a government created widespread fear, stamped it official, and built a machine around it. Now, Claire and Zoe have been working to force a modern reckoning with that history. So I asked them, what are your goals? And how do you know when you've won?
First, to pardon all those that were convicted, and that's to change their status legally from people that were convicted as witches back to just people who had suffered a terrible miscarriage of justice. So that was to write their name in history. I also wanted an apology for all those that had been accused, because many people had been accused but had maybe died in being tortured or had their lives ruined by an accusation even though they were acquitted. And so I wanted an apology for everyone who was affected by the witchcraft trials. And the third thing was a national memorial, some kind of tangible way of remembering those people that had been executed as witches. So we're coming close to our campaign being finalised, because on International Women's Day 2022, our First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, issued the first ever acknowledgement since the witchcraft trials of a state apology.
These accusations and executions were instigated and perpetrated by the state. And so today, on International Women's Day, as First Minister on behalf of the Scottish Government, I am choosing to acknowledge that egregious historic injustice and extend a formal posthumous apology to all those accused, convicted, vilified or executed under the Witchcraft Act 1563. Now, some will ask why this generation should say sorry for something that happened centuries ago. It might actually be more pertinent to ask why it has taken so long.
In relation to the pardon, we have gone through all the processes we need for a private member's bill, and then for reasons I won't go into and bore you with, the person that was taking it forward could no longer do that because she went into the Cabinet of Scotland, and we have to wait till this coming May until we can start again with someone new. And then our third thing was the National Monument, where we hit a stumbling block for quite some time, didn't we, Zoe?
Yes, in so much as getting a statue, which is our initial thoughts were, because Claire, had this realisation about the lack of statuary for women. We had decided that we wanted to have some sort of memorial, and we approached the government and they suggest we support you, but we just don't have any money, which is fair enough. There's other stuff that's probably more pressing. And then Claire had this brilliant idea of commissioning a tartan, because that's obviously really important in Scotland and it tells part of Scotland's story. So Claire had this idea, because my friend Leonie Bell runs the Victoria and Albert Museum of Design in Dundee. We went to the launch party for their tartan show. And so we spoke to Leonie, and Leonie said, right, I know the person for you to talk to. And it was Claire Campbell, who runs a mill called Prickly Thistle in the Highlands of Scotland. We approached her and she came up with some different ideas based on some stuff that we said to her. So we commissioned the tartan and it just went absolutely wild.
Will you describe, first of all, what a tartan is to those who maybe are having a hard time picturing what we mean by tartan? And will you describe the different colors in the tartan for this memorial and what they signify?
Well, in America...
No, are you going to say the word plaid?
It's plaid. They say
do
plaid.
They
Yeah.
You can tell my Scottish accent, AI, plaid.
In America, people call it plaid.
Plaid.
It's just fabric that's got like a checkered design where it's been woven, where it's these...
two up, two under. It's a specific type of weave, two up, two under.
And the colours that we went for are significant. So our tartan is largely black, which represents the dark times. Red, which it's like a reddy pink, which is, that phrase, tied up with legal tape.
Tied up with red tape.
Tied up with red tape, sorry. So that is a phrase that's used here, presumably started here. And it's something where when you get legal documents, they're literally tied up with like this red ribbon. It's like a pinky red ribbon. So that's to show that the witch trials were done absolutely within the law. So this wasn't something where people were going kind of like wild and crazy. It was something where you had to do it legally and it was all built into the law. And that's really important to us. It's also got a kind of a grey through it, and that symbolises like the ashes from when they destroyed people's bodies. So they hanged them and then they burned their bodies so they couldn't rise up and do the devil's work. Also the different counts. Claire, you're always better at remembering the numbers than me.
Yes, so the different threads mean different things. So the check that's black on the material is 173 threads by 173 threads, and that's to mark out the dark times.
The years.
The pinky red thread has got 3 lines of red running through the pink to make it pinky red, and that's the 3 aims of the witchcraft, the Witches of Scotland campaign. There's 2 single white lights running right through it, and that's Zoe and I, and the distances between the checks are made by adding up the single digits of the start of the act and the end of the act. And there's 1 or 2 wee additional things in it. For example, there is a grey part and there is a black part together, checks. And one of the grey ones slightly larger than the black one, and that's because the grey one has 25 threads and the black one has 20 threads, showing that this was a tartan which was created in 2025. So in future, people can explain that. So it's pulling the threads of the past, if you'll pardon the pun, into the present and remembering what happened to people then in order to galvanise ourselves to do something about injustice now.
Now, the tartan can look like just a symbol until you realize that it's also a blueprint, how fear becomes law and how law becomes violence. On their podcast, Witches of Scotland, they hold that blueprint up to the light. They name names, they trace the law, they bring in experts, and suddenly, the pattern is clear. And their book, How to Kill a Witch, The Patriarchy's Guide to Silencing Women, is the expanded case file, a warning about what superstition and bias can look like when they're written into policy. Zoe tells a story about a reaction to the book, suggesting that even the way we talk about witch trials can reveal the things we do not want to see.
You can show somebody facts about something and they'll still not be interested in understanding what the facts are about it. One person, it was an American reader, their review was, it's weird, it's like they copied Salem. And I was kind of like, okay, so Salem happened because this had happened in Scotland and in England, and then Scottish and English people came across to America and set up that system. I'm sorry to have to say this, but Scotland was the originator of a lot of this horrible behaviour. We got interested because of King James with some stuff that was happening in other places in Europe. But it was second only to Germany for, the fervour for which people sought out and got rid of witches. It was a really huge driver in our country's psyche. And that was brought over to America, which is another terrible part of colonisation. And I think that the way that we treat women is definitely better, but we're nowhere near having equality, parity. We don't have the same pay. Our health is more and more precarious as time goes on, particularly Black women, their health, particularly when they're having babies. That has not improved even remotely to where it should have by now, right? So we're still very much in the trenches of trying to get equality with men. And if anything, it's going backwards now. There's a really concerted effort to take away our rights, which is just mind-blowing that there are people that are so willfully ignorant that they think that this is a good way to take the world in a direction-wise, because it's not going to go well. I mean, it doesn't. We know that repeatedly in history. So I think that this basis of the Scottish witch trials has really informed a lot subtly, but there's that level that's there that's sort of in with the idea that women are lesser than men, that men are much cleverer than women, that men are morally superior to women, that women were witches because the devil approached them and women were too stupid to say no, or they were sort of power grubbing. And so they thought, well, this is the only way I'm going to get power because I'm not a man, I'm going to go with the devil. And I don't think that idea is gone. I think that idea is still there, even in a largely secular society in the so-called West. I think that we still have this idea that women are inferior, and even if you're not religious, they're not good. They're not goodies in the way that men are, morally upstanding and women are, turnable. So I think that that's still in our collective psyches.
Claire?
Absolutely. I don't think anything very much has changed. I actually think views are going backwards. And I think that that's something that's being felt very strongly worldwide by women at the moment. The danger is that we think that because we have rights, those can't be taken away. And as a lawyer, I know, just as a woman, I know, I suppose, as well, but as a lawyer, I've got a better insight into the idea that the law is not going to protect your rights. The law can be amended, it can be changed, it can be redefined, and your rights can go in the blink of an eye. And people's rights are going. You only had to see that with the overturning of Roe v. Wade to see how people's rights in relation to their body autonomy can go. As a result of that, I think that the picking out a group of people when times are hard and saying they must be responsible for what's gone wrong, see if we can fix that. And if we can get them under control, then everything else will be good again.
So I think that what's important for us is that we look at what happened during the witch trials, and we look at this idea that in times of social unrest and worry, like, so for example, we're worried about war, we're worried about climate disaster, we're worried on a smaller scale, like in your own personal life, about, am I going to be able to make my house payments? Is my child going to be able to buy somewhere to live? Are they always going to have to live at home? These kind of worries. And then if you've got unscrupulous politicians and leaders who are working hand in hand with incredibly rich people, they are going to keep feeding you this line of, well, it's this vulnerable group's fault. And if we get rid of that vulnerable group, then everything's going to be golden again. It's bull. That's not going to change things. What's going to change things is that those politicians and those incredibly rich pals of the politicians out of here. So I think people have to really get on their feet, and really made their voices heard, and remember that politicians work for the populace, that we vote in and vote out, and that money that's spent should be coming from the populace. Now, I know that you're in a peculiar position just now where a lot of the laws aren't really being followed, but I do feel full of hope. And we're on a similar track in the UK, by the way. There's some pretty nefarious behaviour from some people, but we need to be really on our toes and understand history, and that doesn't get repeated, or it stops being repeated, because it is being repeated just now, and that we use our votes wisely, and that we hold people to account, that we start thinking again instead of just tuning out and looking at our phones, that we actually go, right, okay, I'm a human being that lives on this planet, and we've got one planet and we need to sort it out. So I do have hope that there are more good guys than bad guys. I just think that the bad guys control, like, lots of aspects of what we listen to and what we look at, and they're noisier and they're brasher. But I think there's lots of good and quiet people that now need to have their voices heard.
Claire, what keeps you going?
Well, the rage. The rage. I think what keeps me going. What keeps me going is that I really want to leave this world a better place than we arrived in. If we don't act as quarrelsome dames, Quarrelsome Dame is a title that we have taken back because Quarrelsome Dame was one of the first tests of whether or not you were a witch in Scotland, was whether or not you were a quarrelsome dame. And I want to take that back. I want to encourage women to be quarrelsome dames, because if we don't stick up for our rights, if we don't feel that rage, if we don't try and make the world a better place, then we are going to get to a very dark place very soon. So I don't think I have an option about it. I just think that it's something that we have to do. Don't live, laugh, love. Shout, swear, subvert.
Well, Claire Mitchell and Zoe Venditozzi, thank you so much, you quarrelsome dames.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, we really appreciate it, and thank you for your thoughtful questions. You asked us a few there that we haven't been asked before, so thank you.
Here in Connecticut, the state cleared the names of all those accused of witchcraft in our state and issued an apology back in 2023. We've got a link to an episode from our morning show, Where We Live, where they check in with the Connecticut Witch Trial Exoneration Project. That's at ctpublic.org/audacious. This show is always lovingly produced by quarrelsome dames Jessica Severin DiMartinez, Meg Fitzgerald, and Robin Doyon-Aiken at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford. Stay in touch with me on the socials at Kyone Wolf, and you can always send an email to audacious@ctpublic.org. Peace and pipes.